Hello, Roll Mithril here once again, getting back to Mag Mammal 2. It's time for the judge commentary on the last couple of stages. Nothing for City War, we kinda covered that back in Mag Mammal 1. So, we're starting with 48th place, Game Trooper's Volcanic Furnace. Snow and Pyro. Good level overall. The level really picks up in the second half, I think, once Guts lifts come in. The first half isn't necessarily bad, it's just less focused than the second, and there's some enemies there that are used like literally once. The Sub-Ills, Nobitas, etc. I'm not really sure right off which those are. Once the Guts lifts come in, though, I feel like the level plays a lot better, especially because it combines the lifts with stuff like Fire Pillars and Killer Bullets. I'm not sure if I like the Killer Bullet stretch, though, because it feels like the bullets can screw you over too often. Most of the level still plays really well, though. There's not much beyond that, really. It just plays well, it sticks to a few gimmicks, it's just plain good. Jupy Hornet. This level wasn't bad design-wise, but it was a mess aesthetically. There are features from like 6 different tile sets, which is fine if you do it right, but in this level it was clashy and didn't look good. The first half of the level was really fun, but the second half was a bit extreme with the Guts Lift and Firebar section. Angel. I always find it rather sad when one particular section of a level overshadows everything else that goes on in the level. In this case, it's the Guts Lifts that are introduced halfway through, since it's very easy to die there. The level as a whole is pretty nice and has good flow to it. It sadly introduces elements it later forgets about, but is still fair and enjoyable. The Guts Lift sections, while not bad, can be very difficult to traverse because the platforms don't always line up well. In the first section it can be especially difficult to make one's way across these platforms because of the missiles constantly getting in the way. Aside from that, fun stage. I also got out of bounds once. Oops. Giriri. There's not a lot to talk about here. I don't think this is a bad level, but it's certainly nothing awesome. The level design is flawed, with quite a bit of bugs present, not to mention the sections with multiple instances of lifts, which are desynced. Other than that, there's just nothing. It's an okay stage, but there's just nothing interesting here. Ace Spark. I can't call this bad, but it's not good. It's perfectly playable for the most part, but you do drop the ball significantly in several spots. This stage is ugly. Misused tiles, wonky animation, and tiles that are completely at odds with each other. Some segments even look unfinished. There were some good ideas here and there. Your combinations of Firebar types were neat, as were 2 of the later Noble Nickels, but your Guts platform segment was seriously wonky, at times really stupidly difficult for its own good. Why would you combine sine wave enemies that explode and respawn alongside tiny platforms and jumping to other tiny platforms? I suspect you played this level once or twice, convinced it was possible to do it, and then didn't bother seeing what other players of other skill levels thought. If you do not do that segment exactly right, you are waiting ages on a platform with high risk of death. That being said, the last Gutsman platform segment did what any good Mega Man stage should do, and combine gimmicks with other gimmicks. That is good. And that one feels a lot closer to the proper difficulty than the Nutball Killer Bullet segment. It's a shame you just have badly implemented elements all over the place, as if these worked better, you'd have the makings of a fun, if pretty average stage. Oh, your use of a boss corridor without any climax? No. So, yeah, I definitely fell victim to that whole thing of being on a Guts lift and having to deal with Killer Bullets while waiting for things to sync up so I could jump to the next one. And again, I was largely saved, I'm pretty sure, by the Met Helmet. It was confirmed that, yeah, the judges didn't have those items to play around with, so it does make a lot of segments a lot easier to deal with than what the judges had to deal with. Overall, the stage was pretty okay. Some of the graphics, they did kind of mesh weirdly, but at the same time, I also liked the attempt to make them work together. And yeah, overall, pretty decent stage. And then we have 47th place, M9M's Elec Dam. Snowrun Pyro. Oh hey, it's that one gimmick from Rock Force. Unfortunately, it doesn't really do anything with it. The enemy types it chooses to use are some of the beefy, annoying ones, Hammer Joes, Komasoguros, and Fanfiends, and the timer for the electric water is really slow, so the level just kinda amounts to button mashing against the tanky enemies and doing the occasional jump to avoid getting shocked. It's not really the best, and there really isn't any creative setups with the electric water at all. It just kind of exists there as a mild hindrance. There's really not much else to this level, really, just button mashing against enemies. The music is nice, though. Jupy Hornet. Not a very interesting level. The shock gimmick in the water was kinda cool, but it wasn't introduced well or used in an interesting way. Like the one in Shockman stage in Rock Force. I didn't realize it was there until I got hit by it. Angel. A fairly decent level centered around the flashing water mechanic it introduces early on. I think it was pretty fun, but could convey its ideas to the player better and use its resources in a more organized manner. Basically what I mean is how the level makes a few assumptions about the player, which cannot always be guaranteed. On my first playthrough, I completely missed the flash of water in the safe room in which it is introduced, only to then be surprised by it on the next screen while I was fending off a Hammer Joe in the water. In addition to this, I feel like the level consistently drops a few too many enemies on the player at a time, with the first screens already using 2 tanky ones in synergy with each other, and later screens almost ambushing the player with 4 at once. It can be quite overwhelming. As a result, I often found myself sticking to the edge of a room while taking care of the enemies currently on screen. But in some areas, this became a problem as I got hit by the water from the adjacent screen, which I was already past, but which had a hitbox extending into the screen I was on. Wow, okay. Overall, nice idea, but it needed more ideas mixed with the core concept to mix its challenges up. Gariri. There's not a lot of bad things about this level, but there's even less good things. I just feel that it offers absolutely nothing new or interesting, and it just gets boring most of the time. The one fairly original gimmick isn't interesting, and the level design is mostly just empty and boring, and occasionally has too many enemies in one area. I don't know what else to say here. It's okay at best, honestly. And A Spark. That stage was certainly there. It existed. Reusing Rock Force's Shockman gimmick was absolutely fine, but this feels one-cheeked. One stretch was interesting towards the end of the level, leaving me with nowhere to go but time a jump out of the water. This was good. Wanted to see more clever sections like that. I think in this case, implementing another dev kit gimmick might have been good for you. This wasn't bad, but very average across the board. In other nitpicks, the color scheme was bizarre and somewhat clashing, although the tile set looked great otherwise, and there were several missing collision tiles in the middle of the stage, and it is possible to get stuck. Fixed post-judging. Okay. So, yeah, another of those that I was wondering what was being talked about there, but it turns out it got fixed. The enemy selection was also pretty mixed, and several screens were very crowded. Overall, it's not bad, but very average, and I doubt many will remember this stage at all. Yeah, this was one of those stages where enemy placement, it did feel kind of feast or famine. Either you had very empty segments or very overcrowded segments. I do agree, though, that making you time jumps out of the water to avoid the shock, that was kind of a nice gimmick. That was kind of nice to have to time that, and looking at the timers in the background, but it did kind of catch me off guard that 0 counts. It didn't really punish me too bad for not noticing that, but it did kind of come as a brief moment of panic. But yeah, with that, that's where we're going to call it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, fare thee well.